since I was a kid, I found the power of good storytelling endlessly fascinating.
Why do we get so wrapped up in the lives of fictional characters? Why do we care about what happens to them? Why do we dissect their actions to no end in forums and analytical writing, wondering what we would do in the same situation? Because the media is more than just an escape. It's a reflection of reality, and the characters we love show us the best and the worst of what we can be.
But inevitably, some media are just going to be better than others at reflecting reality. This year I plan to start a series looking at some of the finer points or ins and outs of good writing. To kick things off, let's start with a look at some literary techniques you should probably avoid.
The top 10 worst tropes. Number 10. The third act misunderstanding. Oh, but this trope has been beaten to death. While there are instances where the misunderstanding may seem natural given the circumstances, most of the time these are exercises in contrivance to inject drama into the climax, forcing the heroes apart only so they can reconcile in the end. While a common pitfall of the romantic comedy, the third act misunderstanding can happen to any allies, and Disney is particularly guilty of using this trope in basically every way you can possibly imagine. As with a lot of tropes, it's not necessarily bad on its own, but man, it's been used so much at this point that your execution better be perfect. Or, better yet, you might just want to find a different avenue for your drama. See also liar revealed, second act breakup, and breakup makeup scenario.
It's really a shame he didn't get juicier stuff last night, you jerk!
Mia, I have nothing to do with this.
Number 9. A world of snark. Don't get me wrong, I love me some deadpan snarkers, but when every single character speaks solely in snarks all the time, it can get to be a little much. This just isn't the way most people in real life carry out the majority of their conversations. Granted, most worlds of snark are sitcoms that exaggerate the meanest aspects of life for comedic purposes, but still, don't be afraid to write characters who are more sincere or even downright incapable of sarcasm. It'll make the snark stand out that much more.
Which is why Arceus created a universe with 3 states of matter.
Arceus?
Look it up.
Number 8. Adaptational personality change. Sort of. Well, more specifically, I'm talking about this trend in the media that seems to be pretty popular lately. It's to try and do perspective flips and tell a classic story from the villain's point of view. When done well, telling a well-known story from an unconventional perspective can be quite thought-provoking. When done poorly, it can give you every bit the one-sided, flat, black-and-white story you had in the first place. Maybe even worse because the perspective flip is actually trying to be deeper and more meaningful. Basically, if you're trying to make the villain look good, but you have to make all the heroes incompetent jerkasses to do it, you have not succeeded in writing a more subtle, nuanced story. At best, the heroes in this perspective flip will be well-meaning if naive, but at worst you'll just end up with a new set of heroes and a new set of villains. For your story to be truly morally gray, all your characters should have virtues and flaws, and they should all be explored, not just your misunderstood anti-hero.
Malfoy, you okay?
That felt good.
Number 7. Info dump. You've heard of show don't tell, yes? Books can be guilty of info dump, although some writers make it fun. But it's especially noticeable in visual media like film and animation, where a picture really is worth 1,000 words. Showing a character's actions, the nuances in his relationships, the reactions to her circumstances spelled out clearly on her face, is 1,000 times more effective than telling the audience what's happening, how characters are feeling about what's happening, and worst of all, how the audience should be feeling about what's happening. One of the worst offenders of all time is The Last Airbender, which is roughly 90% narration.
My brother and the princess became friends right away.
Number 6. Double standards. Whether it's violence, rape, foul language, or what, if one gender, race, religion, etc. is allowed to do it and another gender, race, religion, etc. is not allowed, basically if one group can get away with doing something while another group is not allowed to, it's a double standard and you should not have it in your writing. And straight up averting these double standards typically doesn't work either, because most of the time it's either something that nobody should do or something that anyone should be allowed to do if they so choose. Sadly, there are a lot of these tropes, and they are deeply embedded in the collective consciousness. And they're everywhere. Look under the non-gender related other tag. There's probably stuff you haven't even thought of. In an ideal world, writers would treat their characters as people first, and by gender, race, religion, etc. second. Characters would simply be allowed to be who they are, free from judgment and preconceptions. One show that avoids double standards better than almost everything I've seen is Avatar: The Last Airbender, which features characters of every shade and personality and treats gender, skin color, and nationality as secondary characteristics. The sequel series, Korra, does it arguably even better. Take a look at this page and study the tropes listed here. Learn them well so you won't repeat them.
Women are allowed to get angrier than men about double standards.
Number 5. Will they, won't they? Make it die, please make it die 1,000 painful, fiery deaths. For some reason, writers seem to think this is the best, nay, only way to write drama in a leading romance. Exploring all the emotional ups and downs of a marriage, following the couple as they figure out where to live and what to do about children and deal with things like mortgages and postpartum depression? Screw it. None of that can be half as stimulating as watching two people who are clearly going to end up together do nothing but get ship teased. Bite me, Hollywood. For some reason, romance seems to be especially difficult to write. In recent years, Ross and Rachel became the go-to example for this trope, so much so that other series even lampshaded it. But Will They, Won't They has been around much longer than that. Daniel Z pointed this out to me on one of my How I Met Your Mother vlogs, that this trope is also called the moonlighting curse. Named for an 80s dramedy about a detective agency and a quirky mismatched couple, the show scored high ratings until the unresolved sexual tension between the two leads was resolved, at which point the ratings tanked, leading to the superstition that audiences don't want to see happy, stable couples work through the tougher intricacies of a relationship. They want characters to repeat the same self-destructive cycle ad infinitum. Never mind the fact that there was a host of behind-the-scenes reasons for why moonlighting fell apart, not the least of which was the fact that, due to scheduling conflicts, the two romantic leads were literally unable to appear in the same scene together for an entire season after their initial hookup. Sure, a hookup may be more satisfying if the couple endured a lot of trials to get there, but the story's only just begun at that point. Can we please, please, please have something different?
You two have been on and off again more than Ross and Rachel from Friends.
Please, I'm nothing like Ross.
Of course not. You're Rachel.
Number 4. Status quo is God. Nothing is more satisfying to me than a progressive story with arcs, character development, and an ultimate conclusion that gives the series purpose. So nothing is more frustrating than a series in which nothing ever changes. Especially prevalent in cartoons and sitcoms, this trope exists to keep a story familiar and comfortable, or to ensure that reruns can be broadcast in any order and it won't matter. For light, fun fare, it can be fine, and there is certainly a tightrope act you need to walk here. Keep the status quo too much, and your story can become stale and your audience bored. Especially frustrating if it seems like there might be forward momentum, but to stop it, creators constantly employ narrative cock-blocks like the snapback and the reset button. Aesop amnesia ensues when, as a result, your characters have to keep relearning the same lessons over and over.
What the hell is going on?
We took our apartment back!
Number 3. Death is cheap. Death is the next great adventure, but in sprawling fantasies and comic book worlds, don't expect death to be permanent for too long. The problem lies in the fact that death should be a significant, game-changing event in the story and the characters' lives. But if dead characters can simply be brought back, what weight does death even have? This trope is so common in comics, it's also called comic book death. ABC's Once Upon a Time is particularly guilty of it. So many major characters died just to be resurrected when the plot demanded it, I couldn't take it seriously after a while.
Frank's dead again. Jeez.
Number 2. The reset button. A special way of enforcing that status quo is God is to wipe away all traces of the plot. Revert the world back to exactly how it should be, so the protagonist won't have to deal with the consequences of having royally screwed up. If you want to ensure that none of your characters ever evolve or grow or become better people, employ this trope.
I wish that everything was back to normal, and nobody remembered any of this.
Of course, with the reset button, there is still a chance that the protagonist will at least remember the lesson he learned and, be able to carry it with him in the future. Such is not the case with the worst literary device of all time.
Number 1. All just a dream. Want the quickest, easiest way to obliterate any meaning your story had up to this point? Simple. Say it never happened. Remove any consequence, physical, emotional, narrative, what have you, for what the characters have been through, and start over. Even in this case, there are classic stories that have managed to use the trope well, and dreams can be used to achieve great paranoia feel in horror works. But most of the time, taking big, game-changing events and saying, oh, it was just a dream, most of the time that comes across as cheap, lazy writing, an easy way for writers to undo big changes in the plot and retcon the story as it serves them. It's the worst twist ending and the quickest way to get your audience to throw their drinks at the screen.
Or is the monster gone?
Tropes are just tools. They aren't inherently bad, and you can find examples of most of them done pretty well. But what most bad tropes have in common is laziness, a tendency to cheap drama rather than thought-provoking interactions, retcons when writers have written themselves into a corner rather than trying to find a more satisfying resolution, and a reliance on old standards instead of trying to create new ones, or even better, writing a story that just feels natural, something that can't be put in a box and labeled so easily. Tropes are a great springboard, and they're a fun place to go for inspiration, but they're just starting points. Take them, analyze them, find the ones that really speak to you, and ask yourself why that is. Then play with them. Subvert them, defy them, invoke them, and avert them to create really well fleshed out stories. I hope you found this list useful, or at the very least interesting. Do some digging yourself and let me know what your favorite and least favorite tropes happen to be. And as always, I'm eternally optimistic, and I'll catch you guys next time.